Hello everyone, I'm doing an experiment here where I want to record what I am referring to, but I'm going to try to do it so the text works as well. So I am recording right now, and yes, it seems to be working. So I'm going to basically talk about some of the things that a couple of my clients have talked to me about recently. They read a book called Body by Science by Doug McGuff, Doug being somebody that I know and respect very well. And in it, they refer to when doing a set of resistance training, the set recommendation, the length of time for that recommendation should be about 90 seconds. And the idea of it is based on a principle called orderly recruitment of muscle fibers. And basically, what it comes down to is that in the first part of your set of exercises, you are used of one exercise, you are recruiting fibers. Fibers that recruit 100% or not at all. And at first you're recruiting slow twitch fibers. And as they fatigue, they drop off and more fibers come on to take over the load. And eventually you get to medium twitch fibers and eventually to the fast twitch fibers. So the principle of the 90 seconds is based on the idea that if your set is too long, that the slow twitch fibers will get a chance to recover and then be recruited again, and therefore delay or even obviate the reaching of the fast twitch fibers, which is the ones you want to get to, and the ones that are reached when you work till momentary muscular failure, because they are the ones that are most adaptable to adaptation. Now, having said that, I know Doug McGuff, and I believe, and Doug, I'll copy on this, and maybe you can correct me, is that the 90 seconds is meant to be a starting point. And if you go back to a person who has influenced both me and Doug, Arthur Jones, the founder of Nautilus, he used to talk about doing repetitions between 8 and 12. And his cadence at the time that he recommended was 2 seconds on the lifting phase and 4 seconds on the lowering phase. So for 6 seconds per repetition, if you were doing 8 repetitions times 6, that would be 48 seconds. If you were doing 12, it would take 72 seconds. Of course, the 90 second is a little bit higher than that, but in the range. But going back to Arthur Jones for a bit, he also, I believe, acknowledged that this was a starting point. And later on realized that different people had different preponderance of different types of muscle fibers. So he devised a test to figure out who was more prone to benefit from different repetition ranges. So the test was to have people lift a weight in a given movement for one single maximum attempt. A practice, by the way, which is actually dangerous and I don't recommend. But basically the idea was that you found out how much you could lift once, and then you would take 80% of that weight and see how much different individuals, how many times different individuals could lift that weight. Again, using that 2 second up, 4 second cadence. And what happened was that some people were barely able to lift 80% of their 1 rep maximum 4, 5, 6 times, while other people were able to lift it for sometimes 20 or 30 times. So the idea was that the people who could only lift 80% of their 1 repetition maximum for a limited number of reps had a higher preponderance of fast twitch fibers and therefore would benefit from a shorter number, a lower number of repetitions, or a lower time on their load, if you think about timing. Whereas people who were able to do more repetitions with 80% of their 1 repetition maximum are able to benefit from longer ones. And of course, that also might have been different for upper body and lower body for different individuals, and it might also even change over time as people's adaptations to exercise change. Now, since then, interestingly, people like, I believe, James Fisher and James Steele from Salton University in Great Britain, and I could stand to be corrected, have seen studies that seem to indicate that the time under load doesn't matter all that much provided people reach failure. Now I say that with a caveat, because if the time under load is too short, then the amount of weight that's needed could potentially be dangerous because of the force involved with using really heavy weight. And if the amount of weight is so low that the set goes on virtually endlessly, then the challenge is, are people truly reaching failure, or are they simply getting sick and tired of the set and giving up at one point because it's uncomfortable or whatnot? So often it's a matter of practicality. So what I have done with my repetition scheme is I've aimed for a repetition scheme that should, in a perfect world, last about 95 seconds for most clients. Now I start out with a 10-second lifting and a 10-second lowering as per super slow protocol. But then the middle reps, I do a few different reps, and it'll depend on the exercise, either a 5-second lifting or a 5-second lowering, or in the case of exercise where there is a benefit to having a hold in the end, one of the turnaround points, then I'll do a 5-second lift, a 5-second hold, and a 5-second lowering. And then after doing a certain number of those, typically between 4 and 5, depending on whether there's a hold or not, then I go to a final 20-second lowering. And the reason for the 20-second lowering is because as people reach failure, the odds of them starting to compromise their form increases. And the final lowering phase, it's much more difficult it's easier, I should say, to lower in good form than it is to raise in good form. So if I've chosen the weight right, then people will have about 95 seconds of time under load with that final 20-second lowering, and that would be, they would be unable to do any extra repetitions. However, at the end of the 20-second repetition, I encourage people to see if they can do additional repetitions in good form at just a cadence that is smooth and avoids any unnecessary force and good smooth turnarounds. So if I haven't picked the weight right and people continue to do extras at the end of each one, I don't lose too much sleep over it, because that means people are continuing to progress. And most of my clients are over 60, and I have several who are well over 70, so I'm okay with erring on the side of caution. So, does the 90-second thing make a big difference? Well, I'm going to run this by various people. I'm thinking Drew Bay may listen to this at some point. This may be a question for Ken Hutchins. He recently interviewed, and he asked about questions that we could ask Ken. I'd be curious to see his take on it. And also other trainers that may listen to this who may weigh in and say that they have found either greater strength increases or greater hypertrophy based on different times under load, or whether this is more of a splitting hair type of thing. What I have come to sort of make my peace with is that a lot of these various little things really are more or less hair splitting based on the fact that many people's genetic potential, it will not have them becoming world-class lifters or have abnormal amounts of muscle hypertrophy. However, they will really significantly improve their quality of life and their functional ability, particularly into their old age. And the biggest difference is whether people are doing proper exercise or not. That's the single biggest thing, at the rate of stating what might seem like simplistic or obvious. But if you don't exercise, you're obviously not going to get very good results. If you do proper exercise consistently over time, then you'll get great results. And the qualifier to that is you have to do it without hurting yourself. So when I say you do it consistently over time, it presupposes that there are no injuries, because if you do improper exercise and expose yourself to forces that are detrimental to your joints, ligaments, tendons, you will sooner or later sustain an injury and you will not maintain your exercise program. And of course, that would be an entire different discussion and a much longer post to talk about what that takes into play. But safety first. After that, if you're doing those things, the different aspects of whether you're using, in my opinion, looking to be corrected by listeners who have had different experiences, the difference between things like time under load, a little longer, a little shorter, might make a difference for an athlete who is going to be competing in some endeavor where fractions of a second or fractions of a pound could make a difference to either placing or simply winning or not placing at all. But for most of us who are looking for just good functional ability without hurting ourselves and then getting on with our life, our hobbies, our family, and all these things, I don't think these are things you want to lose too much sleep over. Anyways, I look forward to feedback. Hopefully this hasn't been too confusing. I've recorded it on Zoom, and I've also imported it on with the accessibility app so that I'll have text to follow up with. Bye for now.